SwayamPrabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Namaskar, I'm Devdip Purkayastha from the Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay. Welcome to this module of our course. This module is about winning in the market and is based on what we call the WIMF framework, winning in market framework. But before you get into the module itself, just to remind you of the course flow, we started with an introduction to discipline innovation and accelerated startup discovery. We then went into problem discovery. How do you discover urgent, scalable, much needed, a lot of people facing it, problem, a relevant problem. So we talked about the problem discovery framework. And then we talked about the product development framework. How do you develop a product all the way from a customer value proposition to POC to all the way up to checking out supply chain and manufacturability. So mapping the product development with the problem discovery. Now once that is done, the key is take it to market and win in the market, to commercialize it, to have customers buy it, to generate revenues and profits, and then to scale it, have more and more customers buying it. So that is the winning in market, and it comes under the overall disciplined innovation approach. And to remind you, disciplined innovation will help you through a structured process to manage technology to create new products and develop revenues, profits, whether you are an MSME, whether you are working for a large company, whether you are a student trying to learn new skills or build a business. And if you look at the screen, just to remind you, here are the innovation elements of disciplined innovation, which we have talked about before. Before I get into today's lesson, let's do a quick recap of where we are in the course. And I talked about the 8C of problem discovery. We then moved on to product development. How to create winning products, and I offered a framework called the 8P product development framework. Today's lesson is about winning in the market. Once you've identified a good problem to solve, you have created a great product, how do you win in the market? After this lesson, and as a very sneak preview, we will move from winning in the market to what is called a technology push framework, which means that you've got a very deep tech, high tech technology which is there in your laboratory, and how do you push it out into various modes into the real world. So this lesson about winning in the market will have 5 components. I will start with why do we need a framework to win in the market, and then talk about what is a good framework to use, a very structured, disciplined way to win in the market, but at the same time being iterative and being agile to respond to changing market needs. And then I'll talk a little bit about who can use it, what are the benefits, how you can adopt, and what are some of the skills that's needed for this framework. In terms of pedagogy, in terms of sharing this lesson, I will actually share a lot of real-world case studies. which I will request you to research further so you get the true learning benefits. Most of these case studies are for my own life in terms of products that I've used or services that I have taken advantage of. These are mostly big name, well-known products, well-known companies. There's a lot of material in the internet, and I will, in this lesson, give you a few pointers on what to look for. But the real learning value will be when you go out and do your research and you gather your own learnings. So let's start with why do we need a framework, a structured, a disciplined way to win in the market? Why do great products which solve real problems not automatically win in the market? So let's look at a few real-world case studies. Let's start with this aspect of value proposition. A value proposition is essentially what is the value that a brand or a product is offering to the customer. And here are some products and companies that have kind of grown up with, but all of whom have faced challenges. And today, unfortunately, some of these companies don't exist because they've failed or they've been taken over by other companies or they've just gone bankrupt. So Nokia, in the 90s and early 2000s, Nokia was the dominant smartphone player in the world. And especially in India, they had almost 70-75% market share. Very popular. But today, the brand almost doesn't exist. So you should research, like the other cases I'm going to talk about, why did that happen? And essentially, you'll see that Nokia had phones with a keyboard, a small screen with keyboards. And then Apple came in with iPhone, which had a larger screen with a touchscreen facility, and it had a lot of apps and ecosystems. For example, iTunes, app stores, and then over time, earbuds, watches, and all kinds of accessories. And suddenly, the value proposition of a keyboard phone that Nokia was offering was no longer very valuable. And the company declined and actually died. Same with Blockbuster. And there are many similar companies in India through the 80s, 90s, early 2000s who used to rent out videotapes of movies and entertainment, and later on CDs and DVDs. And their value proposition was around at-home entertainment, because you could go out, rent the CD, DVD, or the tape and bring it home, and you could watch them. But slowly, as the OTT platforms came up, like Netflix, this category of players, like Blockbuster in US and many such companies in India, lost their relevance, and the value proposition just went away. Kodak, again a company I've grown up with and very well known because they used to produce the films for the film cameras. Almost a household name because you always use Kodak films and to some extent Kodak cameras for capturing those special moments in your lives, birthdays or anniversaries or wedding or office events. But as photography moved from film into digital, Kodak lost its value proposition. A classic case, big name, big product, completely losing the value proposition as new forms evolved. Two other categories of loss of value proposition. One is around electronic shops. So in the US, you had the Radio Shack And I've shopped there, and you could get a lot of radio equipment in that chain of stores. And it peaked through the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. But then, as big boxes like Walmart, big hypermarket like Walmart, and then later on Amazon, online platforms like Amazon or Flipkart in India came up, the value proposition of a specialty store called Radio Shack started almost going away. And same with Borders, which is a chain of bookstores. And in India also we had Landmark and we had Crosswords and this kind of chain of bookstores. They had a lot of books. Then from books, they started offering CDs and DVDs, sometimes toys and magazines. You could go there, browse the books, spend some time there, buy a few books and come back. But as books went on to online, so you could buy your book on Amazon, on Flipkart, and then as physical books got replaced by e-books and now audiobooks, this network of stores like Borders or Landmark or Crossword lost their value proposition. So something to think about winning in the market is, what is your value proposition? Next, even if you have a great value proposition, you still have to talk about your position in the market. But before I get to the examples on the screen, market position is all about what the customer perceives you to be. For example, Rolls-Royce as a car is seen as a very expensive but very luxurious car. And then in India, if you looked at Tata Nano, which was supposed to be a very cheap car and a very affordable car, the one thought that customers have about Tata Nano is that it's an affordable small car versus Rolls-Royce. The moment you hear the name Rolls-Royce, you think about big luxury cars. So perceptions get created in the customer's mind. And that's what market positioning, customer positioning is all about. And here are some more examples which I have grown up with and you should research. BlackBerry. BlackBerry used to be the email machines till about 2010, 11, 12. And they're very secure, proprietary OS, and you used it for emailing, especially company executives. It's very popular. But then as smartphones, the normal smartphones, started becoming very secure, end-to-end encrypted, and those benefits started coming up, BlackBerry's market position as a secure email machine was not really very relevant because other smartphones could offer the same. So suddenly market positioning of BlackBerry dissolved and the company broke up. Same with Yahoo. Yahoo started off as a web category, web listing, then it became a content provider, then it went into search. But then when Google came in as a specialized search engine, suddenly the market position of Google was that of, if you need information, you Google it. That's still going on. But Yahoo kind of lost its positioning as to what exactly is it, because they tried also email. So is it an email provider? Is it a directory? Is it a content provider? What is it? Sears, again, a great store chain in US, and we have similar store chains in India. But when Amazon or Flipkart, the e-commerce portals started becoming big, many of the chain stores in US and in India and in other countries started ruling their relevance, because suddenly this e-commerce platform could offer much more products at one online site versus what could ever be stored in a physical store. So many of these physical store networks, and these store networks are big, hundreds and thousands of stores, just died away. And India also, we have examples of stores like Big Bazaar, etc., which have struggled and lost their market position. Market positioning also impacted several smartphone high-tech categories. For example, Motorola practically was the first mover in mobile telephony. But it could not keep up with all the advanced and versatile and full service positioning that companies like Apple and Samsung, which offered not just the phone, but a whole ecosystem of apps and music and accessories like buds and watches. Motorola could not probably keep up with them. It lost its relevance in the market, in the customer's mind, and it was bought out. Same with HTC, which at one point in time was very dominant and very popular in India, but lost its relevance as newer companies came in with newer offering, range of smartphones with different colors, different models, different speeds, different kind of appeal. And HTC lost its market position. The next point to think about is also the pricing strategy and promotions that you run on stores. Promotions are basically discounts and schemes that you run in a store or on your product. So there are companies like JCPenney in US which had a lot of schemes and coupons running. So even in India, if you used to go to some of those stores like Big Bazaar, etc., they'll always have a lot of promotions, discounts, 1+1, 40% off, 30% off. If you buy this, you get that free. And you used to get a lot of coupons and handouts. But when these companies wanted to get out from frequent promotions and coupons, which basically meant that the price was like this, then went down, then went back, then went down, then went back. Okay? And some of these companies which are very good at couponing and pricing in terms of discounts wanted to say everyday low price, which means it's a steady pricing but low discounted pricing around the year, like we have in India, in DMart, etc. This loyal customers of these kind of stores could not accept the change. And stores like JCPenney, etc., went under. Same with Sony. Sony had a very good product in the days of tape, videotapes. And they had something called Betamax, but they were more premium and they're better performing. But they could not sustain the price premium. And Sony, being the large entertainment brand, still could not compete. And Betamax lost out to another format called VHS, which dominated through the 80s, 90s. A classic case in the personal computing space was a very popular computer called Osborne. And one of the events that you should research was how Osborne went under, because what happened was they announced a future model at a discount. And because customers knew that a future model is coming at a probably lower price, they stopped buying the current model. So again, that's a mistake in terms of how you're managing your pricing and promotion. There are a couple more examples which I've shared on how to get the pricing strategy and promotion correct. You should research them. One of them is the PlayStation third version of Sony, which followed a very highly successful PS2 and was then followed by PS4. But PS3, which was quite innovative at that time, struggled because it was perceived to be good but highly priced. And you should research that. Many of you would be using a Kindle ebook reader. Now, Kindle is very popular for those who want ebooks, but there are others which are not as popular, like Nook from Barnes and Noble. Again, you can look up why is it that a product, a competing product to Kindle actually never took off. Other aspects. One of the other aspects is around branding and communication. So most of us will be flying on Airbus or Boeing planes. And Boeing planes are extremely popular, but if you look at one model called 737 MAX, that had a lot of technical challenges, and the whole brand image of that particular plane and over time of Boeing itself took a bit of hit in terms of safety, etc. Especially where lives are at risk, it is extremely important that the customer and the consumer have 100% trust in that mission critical, life critical product or service. And the same with hospitals or medicines. So very important that the brand is trusted, and even if things go wrong, the communication is honest and authentic. Quibi was a short format entertainment, well promoted, started very well, but did not take off because the branding and the communication was probably not as strong. And also what happened was that competitors like TikTok came in, and then following TikTok was Facebook Reels and Instagram Reels, which then took over the market, though TikTok got later banned in India, but Quibi actually never could take off. Hoover is a classic case of brand and communication and promotion gone wrong. Essentially, they launched a promotion where you could buy a Hoover domestic appliance for about 100 euros or pounds, and you could get a free flight. And it worked up to a point when the cost of the flight was lesser than the cost of the product. But it became so popular and so many people bought the product for the free flight, and the free flight was more expensive for the company, that the company financials got completely wrong, and the company itself struggled for a very, very long time. So you should look that up. Gap struggled at some points in time with their communication, and a very big story in the late 80s was around Coca-Cola. And Coca-Cola, which is an extremely popular beverage and which many of us have had or like or have regularly, wanted to launch what is called the new Coke. And the new Coke was supposed to taste better, and there's a heavy advertising and rebranding of Coke into new Coke. But I think the challenge was Coke consumer never wanted a new Coke. They just liked their Coke and wanted to have their Coke. And therefore, new Coke, in spite of a lot of branding effort, a lot of communication, a lot of advertising, new Coke was one of the most famous failures of a big brand. And new Coke had to go back to Coca-Cola. The Coca-Cola management had to go back to Coke and give up on new Coke. These are late 80s case studies, and you should look it up. Moving on to other dimensions of winning in the market, and why is it important to have a structured, disciplined research approach. Some of the other aspects are things like social media and which target consumer or customers are you addressing, and how are you influencing them. So Pepsi, as an example, and there are many examples in India as well, is a brand which ran into a challenge because the messaging by one of the endorsers of that brand was not well received by the consumer. And Dove also had, which Dove is actually a beauty brand, which has got moisturizers and soaps and shampoos, etc., from Unilever. And then the social media campaign was not well received. On the tech sector, if you look at Microsoft, they had a chatbot called Microsoft Tay. This was much before OpenAI and ChatGPT and Gemini, etc. But in the early days, the chatbot called Tay actually threw up wrong responses or demeaning responses or responses which were inappropriate and not well liked by the consumer. And Microsoft Tay actually had to be shut down. So these are examples of where in a digital media, you have to be extremely mindful of how you're managing your social media, digital media, etc. Similarly, now that any message, any event related to a brand or a product can go viral in seconds and minutes around the country, around the world, one has to be very careful about the brand and anything associated with the brand. It could be just a tagline, like in Gillette, which is a very large, involves almost the leading men's shaving, grooming brand. Okay, they had a messaging, the best man can be, and that was not well received by many consumers. And we had this case of a company where the CEO said something which was inappropriate and it went viral. So if you are managing a brand, if you're winning in the market, one of the biggest touch points today is around social media, the messaging and the influencing and the targeting. And one needs to be very mindful about that. Other aspects of winning in the market is around selling, B2B or B2C. So if you look at Xerox, is the leading brand in copying. But when Xerox wanted to move from its copier business into a broad-based IT products and services, it struggled. And it could not get into companies which are using its copier services but were hesitant to take the broader other IT services from Xerox. In B2C space, again, HP, which is very well known in printers, also had a nice line of personal computers and other IT products and services, struggled to launch the HP touchpad. Basically, they brought over a very successful Palm Pilot franchise. So Palm Pilot was basically handheld computers, the early generation. It was this small, and you could actually write on it or type on it. It was called the Palm Pilot, and it ran on a WebKit service, WebOS, and HP took all of that and tried to build an HP touchpad. But it could never actually succeed in the face of iPad and other competitors. So again, one needs to be mindful of how you're selling to corporate customer or individual customers, consumers. Groupon, and there are many such companies in India as well, is a couponing company, which basically gives us managing coupons. So when you go to a store and you want to buy some products, you get a lot of coupons. And you could use those coupons later on to get discounted products. Whilst it was very popular for a while, for years actually, the whole couponing business ran into trouble because suddenly consumers had a lot of coupons and they're not using those coupons often enough. And therefore, the sales proposal of Groupon, which is coupon-based, faded away, and Groupon and the whole couponing business actually fizzled out. Instead, today, if you go to an online platform, you get straight discounts. Or if you go to a big store, you will get a straight discount. You don't need a coupon. Nokia Lumia, again, a great company called Nokia launched Lumia in association with another great company, but it could not really take off in the face of Apple, Samsung, and several other smartphone manufacturers who had actually already reached large market shares. The other aspect is around how you're reaching the customers. So in the about 50, 60 years back, product would reach the customers through small stores. And then the big stores came, like Walmart or Costco. And the difference between the big store and the small store was the small store had a few categories and fewer products, maybe a few thousand. But the large stores had maybe 100,000, 120,000, which you'll also find if you go to one of the hypermarts in India. In between, there were the specialty stores. So there are toy stores, and a very large chain of toy stores were called Toys R Us. And they specialized in selling toys. But then as the big store, the Big Bazaar or the Star Bazaar or the Reliance Marts, etc., and then the e-commerce platform, Amazon or Flipkart, they started almost all categories and started offering hundreds of thousands of products. Suddenly you could buy a toy online or in a hypermart. And therefore the need to go to a specialty toy store slowly went away, and Toys R Us as a chain struggled and declined. I've already talked about Borders, which was a bookstore which struggled when the online bookstores like Flipkart and Amazon came on board. Same with Circuit City. Again, selling a lot of electronics and musical products, struggled when there was the large stores, large physical stores, and then there was the large online stores, and then there were the small stores. And therefore the specialty stores selling specific categories or a few categories got caught in between. And they could not adapt to omni-channel, multi-channel kind of competition. So your channel strategy is something which you need to take into account when you're winning in the market. A couple of more examples you should research. One is Best Buy, which was again selling electronics. But what happens is now brands like Samsung or Apple or LG or many of the Indian brands, they would like to offer an omni-channel experience. So what will happen is that an electronic brand or a TV brand or a refrigerator brand, they will make the product and the brand available across channels. So you could buy it online, you could buy it from Samsung.com or LG.com or Godrej.com or any of the manufacturer sites. You could buy it from the Amazon or Tata or Flipkart e-commerce platform. You could go and buy it from a small store, electronic store. You can go to a Walmart or Costco or Target or Carrefour, or in India to Reliance Electronics or Vijay Sales kind of outlet. So suddenly the same product and the same brand is available in many different channels. And the role of specialized channels like Best Buy gets diminished, because when you go to, let's say, an Amazon or Flipkart or a Big Bazaar or Reliance or any of those mega marts, you get a wide range of products. And why go to a specialty retailer when you can go to another retailer which has got That category plus many others. So you research some of these, including Sears, which went under. We have talked some aspects, and I've pointed you to certain case studies that you should research and reflect on. Another one is around customer service, trust, and advocacy. Advocacy is when a customer buys a product from you and likes it so much that he goes and tells his friends and family that the friend and the family should also buy what the first customer has bought. So that's advocacy. But a lot of times, if a brand suffers from a negative event, the customer trust is broken. So there are some global cases, well known, and all of you would have experienced day-to-day cases, which I'll come to in a minute. So we had this big financial services company in US, Wells Fargo, where it came out that there was some inappropriate business practices and there's a loss of trust. And they had to struggle to get back. And same with India. We have had banks like Yes Bank, which went under because of inappropriate banking practices. We have had airlines like United, and we have had a couple of events in India where, because a customer was mistreated, the airline itself lost a lot of customer trust. Same with the service company. So Comcast is a US telecom service provider. In India also you have had many service providers like Reliance Electronics in the early days, not Jio, but the earlier version of Reliance Telecom. And many such companies which provided very poor customer service, and they lost a lot of customers. And even today, if you're ordering from, let's say, a food delivery service like Swiggy or Zomato, and you get bad food or delayed food, you will probably not trust and not use that particular service, but switch to a competitive service. So customer service, be it a product or be it a service, is extremely important to win in the market. Couple of more examples, and there are examples in India as well. Even in social media, there have been controversies around the social media post. Though the platforms themselves may not be legally liable, there have been controversies sometimes about the platforms and mostly lots of times about the content that is being posted on that particular platform. And if you are consuming digital content from a particular platform, a digital platform, it is very important that you trust that platform so that you can trust what you are seeing from that platform. And look at WhatsApp, for example. There are a lot of good things which comes out in WhatsApp every day, but there are many things which are not either correct or either not appropriate, sometimes hate mongering, sometimes disinformation, sometimes lies. And a lot of times people actually question the platform itself called WhatsApp because we're not sure exactly what you're getting in WhatsApp. So again, you have to be careful about the trust that the customer or the consumer has in your product, your platform, or your service.